Okay. All right, so we'll record this, so it should be available to everyone shortly after today's call, so that'll be great. Okay, so just to kind of let everyone know, I will take a break about once an hour, so don't think that you're going to have to sit here for 3 hours without being able to get up. I will take a break about once an hour to kind of allow everyone to get up and get moving. And if you do have any questions, please let me know, just, shout them out whenever I'm explaining something. Do not wait to the very end to ask me. Just whenever you have a question about something, say, hey, I have a question, and we'll talk about it right at that point, because that seems to be, I think, the best way to handle questions when it comes to this type of a training. So you just shout them out. Don't worry about stopping me. I'm happy to have someone else speak, so you don't have to listen to my voice the entire time. Okay, cool. So I'm going to give you kind of a little bit of a different perspective than typically what I give clients. Since we are kind of going to be at this in a little bit of a different element, I'm not going to go through kind of the client. I typically go through like some delivery teams and things like that are kind of very client-centric. So I'm just going to kind of skip those things and really go through the nuts and bolts and bits and pieces of the actual platform itself. So I'm hoping that that is a good format for everyone. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I think we have everyone in the call now, so let's go ahead and move forward. Let me hit record here. All right, good. Okay, so TopCoder. I know everyone has a good understanding of kind of what TopCoder is and who we are and how we work, but I just like to always start off with answering the question, well, what is TopCoder? I get asked that question probably 3 or 4 times a week from my friends, my family, just people who I'm out with. They wonder what TopCoder is, what I do, what the whole thing is. And basically, it all breaks down into a way to get work done. So you want to get this work done quickly, effectively, and really at the best price point possible. So think of TopCoder as a resource for any company. So companies have things that they need built. They have mobile apps they need created. Maybe there's reports that need to be structured. Maybe there is entire systems that need to be built or revised or re-upped. All of that can be completed and done through the TopCoder platform. So the way to fill all of that is through TopCoder. Now, there's basically 3 different pieces that make up this process. So the first piece is going to be the community, right? So these are the people who are going to be doing the work. So the community are the people who are at TCO in that arena. These are basically the talent pool of people from which the client is going to benefit. We also have the client, so this is going to be the companies that engage with us on the TopCoder platform, that engage with the Perio and or TopCoder. And then we also have the platform. So the platform is really the tool that's going to optimize the productivity and is really used to connect the community with the clients. So again, you want to think of the community as your resource, and the platform is the way to get all of those things done, the way to get everything completed. So the next question always ends up being, well, how do I reach out to the community? How do I engage the community? And you'll see that actually it all starts with a client. So the client has an idea. They have something that they need to get done, whether it's a mobile app, whether it's help doing reports, or whatever the case may be. The client has something that they need created, and so that's kind of that first piece over there on the left-hand side. And then from that idea, they're going to go out into our Copilot community, and they're going to select someone to kind of lead that project. Now, we're going to get into who those co-pilots are and really explain the qualifications and go into detail about what they do and who they are in just a little bit. But kind of at this point, just know that the co-pilot is kind of, in essence, the right-hand man for the client on the TopCoder platform. So the client will connect with,
Michelle,
yeah.
Why is the client choosing the co-pilot? Or
Good question. So the co-pilots, the client has a project, and the client will kind of post that project out to our co-pilot community. So right now I think we have about 105-ish, maybe 110 co-pilots. And those co-pilots can self-select for any project that they want to work on. So one of the great things about our community, and I'm sure about Cloud folks as well, is that we're not forcing people to do things that they don't want to do. You and I both know that if I'm giving 3 tasks, and I love doing one of them, and 2 of the other ones I don't really like doing, I'm going to focus all of my time and energy into that one that I really like to do. So we completely eliminate that using this TopCoder process because people are only going to sign up for things that they really enjoy doing, that maybe challenge them, that they've done in the past, that they have experience with. That's going to be the type of people who are going to kind of sign themselves up for a project. So the client posts a project into our co-pilot community, and then the co-pilots go in and decide, oh, I like this project, I'm going to go ahead and sign up for it. I'm going to like this project, I'm going to go ahead and sign up for it. And then there is a period at which the co-pilot has the opportunity to give the client a kind of sort of a proposal about what their project should look like, how much time it should take, what an estimated cost should be, you know, what type of development strategy they recommend, what type of competitions they recommend to take that client's project all the way through completion, right? So the client has some choices when it comes to picking that co-pilot, and we're going to get into kind of how that process works and who that co-pilot community is in a little bit. But we on the TopCoder side also help the client choose which co-pilot might be best suited for them. So they don't do this blindly. We don't say, here's a list of proposals, you know, go help yourself. No, that's not what we do. That's not how it works. You know, Brian Incencio is one of the people who kind of connects with the client and kind of helps choose that co-pilot, because since we have worked with the co-pilots so frequently, we know a lot of them, you know, on a name-by-name basis. So we know a lot of them, and we know whose background might be best suited for maybe a specific client or a specific project. So we can kind of help the client choose which one is best suited for them. So it's not something that the client does blindly. It's something that we help them do, if that makes sense.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, sure. Any more questions so far? Nope. Okay, good. Okay, great. So then that co-pilot, kind of as I was talking about before, is going to break that project down into very small pieces, into multiple contests. Now, from what I know about the CloudSpoke side, you guys do a lot of maybe just one-off contests. A lot of the focus on the TopCoder side is doing an entire project. So not just one contest, although we can do that. Our focus is really mainly on doing the entire project from start to finish using the TopCoder resources, using the community. So that's our sweet spot. So this co-pilot is going to break that entire project down into multiple competitions. And then the community is going to compete to fulfill those requests. To win all those competitions, the community will use the projects. So any questions on the way that works? Nope? Okay, great. Okay, good. So let's take, for example, a Comcast case study. So this was a series of client projects that we did over a span of about 18 months. And you can see from kind of the right-hand side there that we created iPad apps, iPhone apps. We created some web page design, and we also did some of the work in the set-top box. So there was a lot of things going on in these series of projects. But the main thing that I kind of want you to pull away from this particular slide here, from this case study, is actually on the left-hand side. We have all those dots, all those balloons, which is a really, really good example of how the competition and collaboration spans not just in the state you live in or the country you live in, but all around the world. So during those 18 months, TopCoder ran 13 projects, and That consisted of 184 contests, and those contests were pioneered by 8 co-pilots. Now remember, the co-pilots are the ones who help prepare and deliver those the assets through those competitions. We had over 550 unique registrants, 185 unique submitters, and winners were represented by 21 separate countries. So again, when we talk about open innovation, competition, and collaboration, this is exactly what we mean. So that's a pretty cool example there. Okay, so one of the most important parts of the whole TopCoder system is the community. And the community in itself is kind of a living, breathing thing. I think right now we have, gosh, I could be totally off, but I think it's over 600,000 members of the community. And they are kind of grouped into separate areas. So I have all of these different community members kind of broken down into 4 separate branches. So let's kind of go over what these different branches are, and we'll take a look at some profiles of these community members so we can kind of take a look at what's behind the numbers when we talk about the platform itself. All right, so the community is made up of these 4 branches. We have our traditional software developers, so those are going to be the guys who are just very uber focused on the development side. So these will typically be kind of your hardcore software development guys. We also have our graphic designers, and the graphic designers have their own space on the platform called Studio. So whenever you hear me talk about studio work or someone on the studio side, just kind of know that those are the creative ones, and they work just a little bit differently from our other branches, but we'll kind of get into those differences a little later. So then we also have our analytic folks, and these are the people who really specialize in solving very high-level complex math problems. And then we have the branch that kind of pulls all of them together, which is our management arm called the co-pilots. So the co-pilots are the ones who really orchestrate everything within the community. Again, you want to think of this person as the right-hand man on any project that a client starts, serving both as a technical lead and also a process manager. Okay, so let's get out of the PowerPoint. Just for the record, I don't like using PowerPoint. I prefer using some live demonstrations. So let's kind of get into some live demonstrations here. So again, one of the great things about the community is that each member has a profile, and the profile is going to list accomplishments and give stats on accuracy and win-loss ratios, or it's going to offer you a portfolio of work for the guys on our studio side. So this is basically where the community gets to brag about themselves. So it's a place where they can go and check each other out, see how many badges they've earned, you know, see their rating and the different things that they've done. So this is really a great tool that the community uses and that we're really proud of, because this is kind of what differentiates us from other people, is that each community member has this profile page. So let's take a look at someone in our development branch. So this is an example of someone who's really zoning in on the front end of the software lifecycle. So things like conceptualization, architecture, component design, things like that. So this is an example of a traditional software developer's profile. Now, anything that this person has ever completed has been tracked. So our system knows everything this person has ever been involved in, what client it was for, what product it was for, and basically how well he did or didn't do in that competition. And you can see that this is going to give us some stats which are listed down here. Now, as a client, there's going to be some things that you'll probably notice about this profile. The first thing is probably going to be the picture. So the photo is something that a community member can either choose to display or not. Underneath the photo, it's going to have this person's handle. Notice that the handle is a color. So the colors are another thing that's kind of unique to TopCoder. If I scroll down a little bit more, you're going to see a graph listed down here towards the bottom. So red, you know, usually means stop, go, not good. However, in TopCoder, it means fantastic, the best of the best. So red is the top color that any member can possibly be. And then below that, you're going to see some other colors: yellow, blue, green, and gray. And pretty much anyone who has any color on TopCoder is really, really good at what they do. People who have this red color, however, are exceptional at what they do. So there's also going to be a rating, and you can see that rating listed here up in the top. So this rating, it's very similar to how chess players are ranked and rated. There's some very long, complicated algorithm that goes with it. But if you're if you're familiar with how chess players are ranked or how they're rated, it's very similar to that. So that's where this rating number comes from. Another thing I want to point out is down here on this rating history is that the members kind of start out learning. So this is a really good example of the learning curve that it takes not only for members but also for clients. So people don't start out on TopCoder being like the best of the best and knowing everything. Of course, they don't. So there is a learning curve both on the competitor's end and also the client's end. So we need to be respectful of that and understand that. And our community does understand that as well when it comes to working with clients who maybe it's their first project, they need a little bit more hand-holding. We do have co-pilots who are really, really good at that, and the community definitely understands that. So moving back up here and talking a little bit more about these stats here, one of the most important stats that you'll see is this reliability rating, which is listed here. So the reliability rating for this particular competitor is 100%, and what basically this means is that every single time that this competitor signs up for a competition, he will submit a good submission that's going to pass screening. So it's going to be a quality submission. So that's where this reliability rating comes from. Basically, every time that this person has submitted something, it has passed screening, which means it has been a quality submission, which is really good to have. Now, this reliability rating plays into some of our other probability statistics that are used throughout the platform. So when we kind of get to those, I'll let you know where those are. But this is kind of where these numbers are derived from. Also an interesting number, I find interesting, is the 75% win percentage. So even though this is one of our very top competitors, he wins 75% of the time. So there is an opportunity for someone to come in and win if this person is registered for the same competition. So they also have these badges over here on the right-hand side, and these badges are earned based upon work that they've done on the platform. There's other ones that have to do with the forums, so how many forum posts they've done, how many SRMs and or any type of other types of competitions that this person has done. So all of these are kind of kept over here, and they're kind of badges of honor. They're kind of a big deal to our community members, so having all of these badges is a really good thing. It's a standout thing for the community. Any questions on this type of profile or anything that I covered? Nope? Okay, nope. Good. Let's move on. So let's move over to another branch and let's take a look at the studio side. So you want to think of these folks as your own creative design team. So you'll see on their profiles that there's not a lot of numbers, there's no ratings, there's no statistics, and that's because this is much more of a subjective analysis, right? All the reviews are done by the client, so there's no real scoring process that we can apply to it, so that's why there's no numbers listed on our studio members' profiles. But what you will see is a portfolio of work to kind of showcase what they've done. So you can see what they're currently registered for over here on the left-hand side, and you can also filter through the work that they've completed by using these kind of different filters down here along the bottom. So notice that some of this work is marked as locked. So this is actually a client preference. So if the client is working on maybe a proprietary item or something that they want to keep confidential, they have the opportunity to limit the work that's shown on the winner's profile. So we do have the ability to do that. Okay, so let's move on and talk a little bit about our analytic group. So these are kind of your typical algorithm hacker type number crunchers who solve those very high level math problems very quickly. So think real world Goodwill Hunting basically is what these guys are. So these guys compete in what we call our marathon matches. So that's the big data stuff. So I believe NASA does a lot with our marathon matches. We've also done DNA sequencing of soybeans, and they also compete in our SRMs. So our SRMs are single round matches, and those single round matches allow these competitors to get this really high red rating number. So on this side of the coin, this rating number is extremely important to this type of competitor. These guys are mostly on TopCoder for bragging rights, so to have this red huge number is a really, really big deal to them. But you can see it's pretty similar to that of our traditional software developer, where we have our picture, we have our handle, we have all our statistics, our rating, the rating history as well, along with any of the badges that this particular competitor has earned. All right, so any questions on those three branches? We had the traditional software developer, our studio side, and or our algorithm profiles. Nope? Okay, good. So the great part about TopCoder is that all of these different branches that I just covered, all of these different profiles, the client actually doesn't need to worry about any of it because the platform will actually calculate all the stats that they need to keep track of their projects. I just like to kind of give some background information behind all of the calculations that are going to be used throughout the platform, including those probability statistics. And so this is, again, an important piece for us, knowing that these competitors do have a way to showcase their success. So I just kind of like to give the background information on our competitors and what they can do. But the branch that you will probably have interaction with, that you will want to get to know, are our co-pilots. So again, think of these guys as the management arm of the community. So these co-pilots, so let's see, okay, so right now we have 116 active co-pilots. So I was close, 105. So these guys are people who have been around for several years and have kind of become senior members of the community. So they have a good feel for how the platform works, and they're really responsible for helping the customer build out their product. So again, think of these guys as a full cycle process manager. So most of the time, these guys are former competitors, and some of them do still compete to some degree, but they're really responsible for taking the client's ideas and managing the client projects. So these guys know how to structure a plan for a project, they know how the pricing works, they know how the community works. The co-pilot is really the person who executes the plan. So not everyone can be a co-pilot. There is a set of standards that needs to be met, and then we screen them, and they have an MSA and an NDA on file. And we're also connected to their banks. That's how they get paid. They also have to have a government-issued ID on file with us. And so they are really vetted out as much as they possibly can be through TopCoder. And we do work with the majority of these co-pilots, you know, on a project basis. So we know a lot of them. All right, so this is an example of a co-pilot's profile. So you'll just kind of notice that we can take a look at the workload. So this is kind of what this particular co-pilot is currently working on. We can also take a look at the history, what this co-pilot has done in the past. We can also take a look at what type of competition this particular co-pilot really specializes in. So you can see this is an example of a studio certified co-pilot. A lot of this, his competitions are in wireframes, UI prototyping, web design. So this is an example of a studio certified co-pilot. Now we have two different types of certification for our co-pilots. We have our studio co-pilots and we have our development co-pilots. We created these kind of two different areas because we realized very early on that our development co-pilots were not so great at running our graphic design and studio contests, and the studio Copilots were not so great at running our development items. So we really created these kind of two different groups to account for that. So very, very commonly on projects, you're going to have both a studio copilot and a development copilot. So one of them is going to run all of your development items, all of your competitions that have to do kind of with the development side. And the other one is going to run your studio items, so any graphic designs or any type of logos or anything else that you need on the creative side. We also have some feedback, which is listed down here. So right now it's kind of like an eBay thumbs up, thumbs down type of feedback where clients can go in and leave feedback for this copilot so that others know whether this is someone who, they potentially want to work with, or maybe they want to steer clear of. So this is really important, and we're trying to kind of push clients to give more feedback about copilots so that we know how the copilots are doing most of all, and that the clients can also see, maybe what the feedback was for the copilots. They can read through it before they select a copilot in the copilot selection process. But it's twofold. It also lets us know how the copilots are doing, because if we have a copilot who doesn't have a lot of good feedback, well, maybe we need to do something about that. Maybe we need to, talk with him a little more, or, maybe see what the problem is. So it's twofold. All right, so any questions on the copilots? No? All right, good. Okay, cool. So what I want to get into now is actually Cockpit. So Cockpit is basically the client portal. And there's a couple different ways we can get to Cockpit. So this is the first way, in which I go to TopCoder.com, and then I hover over this platform item and then select Go to Cockpit. And that's going to bring me to the page that's going to be the opening page of Cockpit. Or if I wanted to, I could easily go to TopCoder.com/direct. Just type that up here, and you'll see it's going to bring me to the exact same place. So there's a couple different ways to get there. The TopCoder.com/direct is a little bit of a shortcut, but whichever way you want is perfectly fine. Okay, so what you are looking at is Cockpit, and Cockpit is always going to open up into this active contests area. And there's a good reason for that. This is going to give you an overview of all of the competitions that you currently have going on. So I can see here I have a couple different projects, but within each one of those projects I have competitions. So as you can see, this project and this project and this project and this project are the same, but I have different competitions happening within that project. And I also have another project over here in which this competition is happening in this project. So this is really great to kind of take a look at what competitions you currently have going on. It's going to let you know kind of where each one of those competitions is in the realm of, in the spectrum of the different competitions that we offer. But each one of these is also a hyperlink, so I can easily get to this contest page or this project overview page if I wanted to. I could check out my registrants. I could jump to my submissions. If I wanted to take a peek at the chatter that was going on back and forth in the contest forums, I could easily do so from here as well. So a few other navigational items here. You can see up here at the top, I have different areas of Cockpit. This recently added recent projects is extremely helpful. This is going to allow you to get to different projects very, very easily if you have multiple projects going on at once. I find this to be extremely helpful. We also have all of our reporting. So we do have some stock reports that can be run, and those reports are located here, and you can just click on any report that you want to run. The reports are able to be exported to a CSV file, so that is something that clients can use, or you guys can use as well. So right now you'll see we're in the dashboard area, and we're in our enterprise dashboard. So in this enterprise dashboard on this left-hand side, you're going to see a whole bunch of other navigation. Right now I'm going to kind of focus on this overview. So I'm just going to click into there, and we're going to filter this just for TopCoder right now. Okay, good. So Cockpit really has two different sides to it. So the first side is going to help you manage everything on a very project level. The other side is going to help you summarize your project at a very macro level, so a very high level overview of everything that you have going on. So what I want to do is I want to start with kind of a basic overview of that second side of Cockpit, so the part that's really going to help you summarize your project at a very macro level to make sure that everything's on target and that your results are being produced. So again, we're just going to see everything that we have going on. So this becomes very useful when clients have multiple projects going on, right? So they have a couple different things going on. This is a way to look at everything on a very high level. So I'm going to select everything that I have going on, so every active project I have for the past 6 months. So this is what I'm going to filter for. And so this allows me to kind of see in these different widgets very clearly what's coming up, what my pipeline looks like, what my total spend looks like, what my milestones are. And we're going to talk about milestones in a little bit, but these are very, very helpful if you have multiple projects going on to kind of follow the project instead of competition by competition, but on kind of a larger term, a larger basis. We also have a roadmap. So this is Tony's roadmap. This is basically letting everyone know our new releases, you know, all the different stuff that's coming up and that's been completed recently on the platform. So one thing that I find really important on this page is this pipeline graph, and there's a small kind of version here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up and talk about this a little bit more. So let's not strain our eyes, and let's move over to a bigger version of that pipeline graph, which is kind of located here. There we go. Okay, so this is a really great graph because it's going to offer us a historical view of all of the competitions and the health of those competitions all in one place. So you can see that we have these competitions laid out for you on a month-by-month basis. And this really allows me to see how many competitions were completed, how many are active, how many are in draft status, and of course, how many have failed. So let's take a second to talk about this failure rate. So the failure rate is always something that kind of piques people's interest, but don't think of this as a horrible, awful thing that has happened. It's not like a big red X on your soul of the client. It's not what this is. We should probably even call it something other than failure. But there's a lot of different reasons that a competition may fail. Now remember, we're talking about competitions that have failed, not projects. So the project would be the high level, and then there's different competitions within each project. So these are just competitions that have failed, not projects. So again, there's many different reasons that a competition may fail. Maybe the scope was too large, maybe the winning amount wasn't enough to balance out the amount of work that needed to be done, or maybe a client just like changed their mind halfway through and they decided to go in a different direction. So all of these things are reasons why a competition may fail, and we do have a lot of fail-safes worked into our process to try to keep our failure rate very, very low. Currently, the failure rate stands at about 10% for everything. So overall, our failure rate is only about 10%. So that's pretty good. But again, we try to keep the failure rate as low as possible so that the clients can have an accurate idea of how long each project is going to take. Any questions on any of this, the failure rate or what's going on here? Nothing? All right, good. Okay, so one more chart that I find extremely useful and helpful is located over in our analytics area. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that over on that left nav. And again, I'm going to filter this for TopCoder. So clients aren't going to have to filter all of this stuff. I do because I'm special. But at any rate, so this is a really great graph because it allows you to see everything on a very high level, and it allows you to compare what you're doing versus what the market is doing. So what is the market? Good question. All right, the market, think of the market as every TopCoder client, every competition that they run, we keep some basic statistics on that competition. So we keep the cost of that competition and the duration of that competition. So that's going to give us the going rate for what an average competition costs and in how long an average competition takes. So that's what this market item is here down on the bottom, the green one. So we know currently at this moment in time, a TopCoder competition is going to cost about $3,300, and it's going to run about 11.5 days. So this top line up here is what the client is doing. So this is TopCoder as a client, not TopCoder as a company. So think of this could be replaced with any number of clients. So this allows me to compare what I'm doing versus what the market is doing. So you really want to be in line with what the market's doing. But we lay it out for you on a month-by-month basis, and you can see different views down here if you want to look at the fulfillment rate. If you want to look at the volume, you can look at that. If you want to leave out the market, you don't want the market in there, you can look at that as well. But I always just like to see that comparison. Now, I can even break this down further. So let's say, for example, I don't want to see an overall cost. I want to see an exact cost. So I'm going to go ahead and see if we can pull up any assembly competition. So I want to know exactly what an assembly competition is going to run me. So I'm filtering it just for my assembly competitions, and I can see that my assembly competitions cost a little bit more, about $4,200 per competition, and they're running about 11.8 days. So any questions on this graph? Nope. Okay, cool. All right, good. Guys, I think we might fly. We might fly through this training. It may only take me half an hour. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Okay, so let's kind of get into the different types of competitions that we can run on TopCoder. So I'm going to flip back over to my handy-dandy PowerPoint. All right, so I have all of our different competition types broken down into 5 different categories. I'm a big proponent of keeping things very simple, and so if I've oversimplified things for people who want a little more detail, I'm very sorry. But I kind of had to have every competition, so to speak, that TopCoder has broken down into one of these 5 categories. So we have our design studio, our development, our UI development, our QA maintenance, and our algorithm competitions. So let's kind of go through what each category offers us and talk through some of the different elements that go into each one of these different categories. All right, so let's start with the one that everyone gets really excited about, and that is our design studio. So these are the guys who are going to lay out very, very detailed designs with logos, web pages, and any banners, icons, buttons, print media, or anything that really requires that creative eye. So their work is very, very subjective. However, remember on their profiles, we didn't see any numbers, there weren't any rankings, there weren't any type of numbers listed on their profiles. So these types of competitions typically return about 10 to 15 submissions, depending upon what you're looking for. And generally, clients like to get more submissions when it comes to Design Studio. But also what's great is that the client gets to decide which submission they like best. So it's really great because the client can pick from a whole slew of different options that they have, and they can just select which one they like best. So it's really comparable to what a design company would do or what an in-house graphic design team would be doing for the client. Okay, so our next type of competition is going to be our development competitions. And within this category, there's many, many different types of competitions that can be run. This is kind of our biggest category that we offer. So these are going to be your traditional software development work. So things like component design and development, system assembly, POC assembly, report creation, things along those lines. Now, unlike the studio side of the community, this and all types of development work are not subjective, right? They're much more black and white. And development work is actually held up against a scorecard to generate a numerical score. So in these types of competitions, the client does not get to select the winner. So instead, the person who has the highest score is going to win the first place prize. So we're going to get into how these competitions are run and how they're scored in just a little while. But just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we walk through the rest of these competition types. Okay, so our next type of competition is our UI development competitions. And these guys will lay out very detailed specs in our conceptualization competitions and our idea generation competitions, and also design the layout and flow of any end user interaction. So they'll take care of the UI prototyping, wireframes, storyboarding, and any presentation documentation you may need. So things like PowerPoint presentations or infographics will also fall under this category as well. So now in all reality, again, if you are one of those very detailed, specific people, our conceptualization competitions and our idea generation competitions, which produce pretty heavy UML, also business rules and workflow diagrams, they could probably be given their own category, but erring on the side of keeping things simple, this is where they're sitting for now. Okay. So our next type of competition is what I like to call QA maintenance. So these guys are pretty much going to QA anything. They compete in what we call bug hunts, and this is where the person who finds the most bugs wins the first place prize. So think of a bug hunt as a very, very big competition. So the payout is typically small, but it allows you to get things tested really, really quickly. Now, these different QA analyses and bug races and bug hunts typically happen pretty frequently alongside of the other competitions that the co-pilot has running. So once a piece of the project is complete, the co-pilot will typically run a QA competition or a bug hunt to make sure that we didn't miss anything. Also in larger projects, the QA team can run the deliverable against test cases in complete test suites to really vet out any errors or inconsistencies in the design or code. We can also use bug hunts for standards compliance too, in architecture, not just in development as well. So one example of this, if anyone works with government contracts, is to ferret out Section 508 problems. So we have done that in the past. Okay, so our last type of competition is our algorithm competitions. And so these are your mathematical geniuses who can basically solve those very high-level complex math problems very, very quickly. Now, typically there's no crossover between this type of competitor and the other types of competitions that we offer. If you remember on their profile, you saw only that the algorithm side and the marathon match side was kind of lit up there. That's because these guys are really only in it to solve extremely difficult algorithms. And we really only have two types of competitions that run under this category. The first really has nothing to do with clients, and typically, you'll never have a need to see these, but a lot of people do find this type of competitor intriguing, so I'd just like to cover what we offer them. So this competition is called a single round match, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, but our single round matches are 80 to 90 minutes long with 3 problems per match where the problems get progressively harder. So think of this as very much a game in a virtual arena split up into virtual rooms, and they're competing to solve the algorithms the best and the fastest. So again, this is very, very brain-driven, very recognition-driven, so they compete in these just so they can have those bragging rights. Typically, there's no money awarded in our algorithm, our single round matching, our SRMs. So these guys are really only doing it because they love doing it, because they want that red number. They want the recognition. Now, the second type of competition that we offer under our algorithm category is our marathon match. So this is that big data stuff. So the NASA, the DNA sequencing of soybeans is what we've done in the past. And this is kind of longer forms of those single round matches that are drawn out into about 2-week long challenges. So if clients have massive amounts of data that they need to break down or optimize, the marathon match is definitely the competition that's going to do it for them. All right, so any questions on any of these competition types?
Hey Michelle, this is Kimby again. I don't know if I saw this a while ago in the profiles, but is there any way to know, or do we even care, if the skill sets are out there? For example, I mean in TopCoder, can I submit something to develop on the Force.com platform? They know Apex code, for example.
Mm-hmm. We have not done a really good job of keeping track of the different types of technologies that the competitors do know. Most of the time, if we are trying to launch something that is kind of an unknown, we do a lot with polling. So we'll just kind of put a poll out to the community and say, hey, does anyone know how to do this? Or does anyone know anyone who knows how to do this? Are you interested in learning this? So there's been times where we've polled the community and the community has said, hey, you know what, I don't know how to do that, but I'm interested in learning it. And then we basically had someone come in and teach the community how to do the new technology or whatever it is that they needed them to do. And then, they've taken that with them and used that for other clients and other projects and other things. So it's not, no, to answer your question, no, we don't keep track of that. But there is a way to find out, if that makes sense.
Okay, sure. And is there a concept of private communities?
We are working with some sort of private communities. So there is a way to limit the communities in which are available to submit for your competition and or your project. So if, for example, you need to exclude Russia or something like that, you certainly have the ability to do that. Limiting your kind of circle of people who are able to submit limits the amount of work you're going to get back and the quality of work you're going to get back. So typically don't recommend doing that. But, for a lot of our government contracts and other various clients who we have, we do limit that amount of work. And we can also, I think we are working with some other ways to kind of have a private group of competitors, but not anything that I currently know of. That's kind of above my pay grade, as they say. So I'm not entirely sure. But we can limit it as stands, but we don't. It's probably going to be more available soon here.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Sure.
Michelle, I have a related question.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned MSAs and NDAs for co-pilots. Is
Correct.
that something we can also do for competitors as well? It's sort of a private community kind of question.
Right, yeah. So if we were to engage with a private community, we would basically set up any type of security parameters that is needed per the client. So it just depends, on what the client wants and or what we would like to see. It's also understanding that not everyone is going to be okay with that. Right? So if you get people who, maybe is one of your top designers, but, maybe they got some background in something, it just depends. Like I said, it's just limiting, but it's definitely something that we can do. It's just you're going to seriously limit the number of submissions and the quality of work you're going to get.
And how does that work? Do you basically put out a call for that you're creating a private community and these are the parameters you'd have to agree to, and you form that community before you start your contest?
You know what? I actually don't know. I can't speak to that. I can find out for you.
I can help answer that one.
Oh, great. Yay.
So, I mean, we've done that with Wells Fargo, and we've got a group of 49 U.S.-only Salesforce developers, and that's kind of a job that's Tim Hicks is kind of working on recruiting those specifically. So if you have that type of need, let Tim know, and he can work on recruiting those members, getting the NDA signed, and then putting them in that logical group.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's actually Aperio as the customer who has that need. So for
Got it.
EMC development. And I have one other question on something you showed earlier when you were showing the costs per contest, and you showed it across the whole
Sure.
market and for TopCoder as a whole. The cost per contest that you showed was just over $3K, like 3,400,
Uh-huh.
3,300. On CloudSpokes, our average cost is significantly less, like 1,000, 1,500 average, maybe it's as high as 2,000. I've heard that the concept of contests on TopCoder is somewhat different from CloudSpokes. Are you aware of enough about CloudSpokes to be able to say why that is?
You know what? I'm not aware, but I would think that the difference is because we offer a lot of back-end development, also the front end, so we have a lot of everything, if that makes sense. We're with CloudSpokes, I don't think you guys do graphic design or get into a lot of the QA stuff at all.
So does the contest include multiple parts, like front-end design and QA and implementation?
Right, so those would be separate competitions.
They would, okay.
Yeah,
Each
so they
one would have a cost of, on average, of $3,300, though.
Correct. Yeah, and like I said, it just depends. For what I felt, this was an assembly competition, so the assembly competitions are running a little more expensive. But if I were maybe to do a banner or an icon here, then it's going to be significantly less.
And I think if I can jump in
Yeah,
here for a
absolutely.
second, Michelle. I also feel that, and again, I'm not as this is Brian in a sense here, by the way. I'm not as familiar with CloudSpokes contests, so I'm only speaking from what I've heard. But from what I've been told, the round of final fixes isn't something that's actually included in a traditional CloudSpokes contest. So basically, anything that needs to be taken care of once it's gotten back. Once it's come back from the member and after review would be spun up into a secondary contest, whereas those fixes are actually taken care of as part of the original contest on TopCoder.
Okay.
Yeah,
And it may seem more expensive in that sense. It would seem more expensive initially, but once you compare it to the cost of the two contests, that would have to be done on CloudSpokes, and you can kind of see a better comparison price-wise.
Okay.
yeah, and
Yeah, I
this
can
is
add a little more
sorry.
color to that too. So I would definitely say that the TopCoder challenges are a little more. There's a little more thought put into them. Ours tend to be a little more casual. One of the reasons for the cost, I think, a typical TopCoder challenge, the review amount is in $900. I think is the average for.
Yeah, we're going to go through it as well.
And where we're paying $50 per reviewer, so that's a good chunk of change right there. As just one example. And they tend to be a little bit longer. Also, I think TopCoder challenges have a 30-day warranty. Did I get that right? Where
That's correct.
Any bugs that show up in those 30 days, they're on hook for, whereas ours, anything that makes it, there's typically that 3-day review process, and once you're awarded a winner, that's kind of where it ends. And then, like you said, a subsequent challenge would be those fixes.
Okay.
Yeah, and
it sounds like the quality of code is much stronger in the end for the cost that you're putting into it.
Yep.
Yeah, guys, I'm just going to pile on one little point here too. This is George. Also, with CloudSpokes, we have a separate architect, and we don't really charge that architect's time against the cost of the challenge per se. It's a fixed fee sort of thing that we bill hours against. Whereas with the TopCoder challenges, you have a co-pilot, and I think the fee is $600 per challenge. So the fee for the architect is really in the challenge itself as opposed to outside of it, which is what we have in CloudSpokes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so you'll never see something in terms of how many hours it takes to get something done or the price per hour in TopCoder. We don't have any type of metric that does that for you. So that's not the way that kind of we do things. It's on a did it get done basis. So if it's completed, then you get paid. We don't care how many hours it took you to do it. If you completed it by the deadline and you won, then you get paid.
I have one more question. With CloudSpokes, the way the terms of service work, if we pay someone and if they win one of the prizes, then we own the code. Is that the same thing on TopCoder?
Yeah, so we kind of serve as an IP broker. So the client, once the client pays, the IP gets transferred to the client.
Is there typically kind of first, second, third prize also like CloudSpoke?
Yeah, it just depends on the competition. We typically award a first and a second prize in our development competitions if there are 2 entries. If there's only 1 entry, obviously the second prize will just be nothing. In our studio side, so on the creative side, the graphic design side, you can basically purchase as many as you want. So if there's 5 or 6 that you like, you can purchase them all.
Is that a predefined price as part of the contest?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. There is a predefined price, but if, the submission period's over and you pick the ones you like and then, a month down the road you you say, oh, well, I want this one too, you can kind of go back to the person and say, hey, I'll give you $25 for the code you already did a month ago. And they typically say, okay. So then you own that as well. But you own it once you purchase it. So we have a lot of flexibility, and whether that flexibility will stay flexible or whether it will become not so flexible, I'm not sure. But as of right now, it's pretty flexible with anything that you want to offer to, those 4th, 5th, 6th place winners.
Great.
Along that lines, Michelle, one
Sure.
of the things we do in CloudSpokes kind of frequently is if, let's say we're only giving 2 places out, we get a pretty decent third place. Or third place entry. We'll just kind of throw a third place prize in there before we finish scoring the challenges, so they get some sort of prize amount. Do you guys have that type of flexibility, or once the challenge is open, is everything locked down?
Once the submission period ends, it's pretty much locked down. In our development items, like our development challenges that we do, it's pretty standard that we only do a first and second place prize. And also very rarely will we ever use a second place over a first place, just because the process to go through getting all the final fixes and everything completed is pretty extensive. And requires a lot of the actual developer to go in and kind of redo things that they've already done. So, I mean, the answer is yes, you could if you wanted to, but is there a point at which you would ever want to do that? Probably not.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I think, just correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, but I think a big difference between TopCoder and CloudSpokes too is that the client's actually logging into TopCoder, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And
So
with CloudSpokes, it's kind of like mostly Aperio logging in and submitting challenges.
right. So everything you're seeing, this whole portal, is what the client sees. So this is exactly what is available to the client. All of these metrics, all of the graphs, all of the widgets, all of this is available to the client. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, good. Okay, so I think what I'll do here is we'll kind of take a break, just a quick 5, 6, 7-minute break here to get up, get some water, stretch your legs, and then when we come back, we'll hop into our example project to go through kind of a TopCoder typical methodology and get into the other side of Cockpit and also talk about the timelines and the different payments and things like that that we use for all of the different competitions. All right, so let's see everyone back at 2:40 my time, so it would be 3:40 East Coast time. Sound good? All right, I'm just going to mute it. I'll leave this open. All right, thanks. Okay, is everyone back? Almost. I think we lost some people. All right, we'll give them one more minute.
Hey, Kimby, are you there?
Yep. Hey, Carl.
Hey, I just want to kind of point out one of the things I think you kind of pointed out. One of the things I think the major difference between the two platforms, and one of the things that kind of excites me is why they're so complementary, is that the TopCoder platform is really intended to be sold as access to the platform and just kind of let it run almost autonomously with the customer. They pick a co-pilot, they have access to it, and it does their thing. Where ours is more, you get it, but you also get it, only under the guise of you have a specialist that's working specifically with you. Not to say that we don't have our own spokes, but still there's still a concierge, so to speak, that's helping you along. So.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of how we would leverage TopCoder for our Salesforce projects, for example.
Yeah.
I promise you'll figure it out. It seems really, it's very robust, right? It's a lot to know. But once you kind of use it and start getting used to it and run your first project through the platform, it really does get easier. But it's just a matter of actually doing it and just not talking, not just talking about it, but actually going in and doing it and kind of do the whole practice what you preach thing.
Yeah.
In TopCoder, we were kind of ingrained. It was ingrained into us to use the platform for everything. So anything we wanted to do, any type of request that we had, anything we needed created, anything we needed done, we were forced to use the platform whether we wanted to or not. But it was really good because it forced us to use it, and it really opens your eyes to all of the opportunity that's available out there for you to do so much more than you thought you could.
Yeah, I definitely get all that. I think my question is more along the lines of, do I submit the challenge, or
Right.
is the customer submitting the challenge, or who's submitting the challenge?
It's not either of those. It's the co-pilot.
Okay.
The co-pilot does it on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, who's working with them? Is it the Period project team, or is it the customer project team? And
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think from my understanding is it will be the client unless the client wants to hire us as a consultant group, and then maybe the leverage management team will come in and do what the client should be doing. So I'm not quite sure how all that's gonna, and I may be completely wrong. I don't know. That's just kind of from the hearsay that I've heard. That might be how it's going to happen.
Okay.
But essentially, we want to make the platform as self-service as it possibly can be, right? So where the client, once they go through some, training, that they can be able to get on here and use it for themselves. I think that's what our goal is, to make it as simple to use as an Apple iPhone. Whether that's going to happen, without some training and some hand-holding the first couple projects, the first couple goes round, it just depends, but I think we're close. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and jump back into the training here. So what I want to do now is I want to give you an example of a way that we run projects through the platform. So this is an example of one of the ways of probably 500 different options that we had that we could run a project through the platform. This just happened to be one way that we decided to do it. So let me give you a little bit of background information on this project we're going to talk about here. So before 3 or 4 years ago, we actually did not have that co-pilot role. So that didn't exist. And so what we knew is that we needed something in that area to kind of bridge the gap between the client and the platform. But we didn't know how it should look. We didn't know who it should be. Should it be a TopCoder employee? Should it be a community member? We didn't know. Should this person be paid? Should they be on payroll? How should it look? We didn't know. So we had this idea. And so what we did is we ran a conceptualization competition. And the conceptualization competition is a really good place to start when you don't know what you want to do. You just have an idea. So I'll share with you the way that my old boss, Tony, used to explain this to me. He would say, this is, so pretend that you're in a bar with a couple buddies, you had a few drinks, and you have a great idea. It's the best idea you've ever had in your life. You write that idea down on a bar napkin. And you stick that bar napkin in your pocket, and you go home, and you wake up the next day, and you go, gosh, that was a really fun night. Oh, wait, I had a great idea. So you take that bar napkin out of your pocket the next morning, you take a look at that, and you go, hey, you know what, this is actually a pretty good idea. I don't know what to do with it. Well, what you do with it is you put it into a conceptualization competition. That is what you do with it. So the conceptualization competition allows you to kind of find out all different ideas around that particular idea that you had. So a couple things about this, the way that this thing works. So we have our input over here. So this is what we put into the competition, and the output is what we receive out of this competition. So in this conceptualization competition, we had some goals. We knew what we wanted to do. We had a high-level workflow, and there's a pretty extensive questionnaire that we filled out for the community so that they kind of knew what angle we were getting at. So then we ran the conceptualization competition, and out of this competition, we got a conceptualization document. And so here is the document. Now remember, this was created in its entirety by the community on our behalf. So they're using context diagrams. Here's that high-level workflow that we fed into it. We have some more workflow, some use case diagrams, and all of this information. So a lot of this, again, all of this came out of the community, and a lot of it was ideas that they had come up with. We also got a development strategy. So the development strategy is a 40-page long Word document, so I'm not going to open that up for you, but I am going to open up the game plan. So the game plan is important because it kind of gives a couple different areas of interest. So the number one thing that a game plan is going to give you is a timeline, right? So we're going to look, the community thinks that this project is going to take from about the middle of the middle of May to the middle of November. So this is kind of the timeline that the community thinks it's going to take to complete this project. And over here on the left are the types of competitions that the community feels we need in order to complete the project. And then you'll see how many of those competitions the community feels we need listed out for you in these kind of pink boxes. And then over here on the right-hand side, you'll see the cost of all of those different competitions. And if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, you're going to see an estimated total. So this is very similar to what the co-pilots give the client in their proposal. In the proposal that the co-pilots give the client, they're going to have something very similar to this, some sort of game plan, so that the client knows up front how long the co-pilot thinks this project is going to take and what their estimated cost is. So now again, this is an estimate. Take it with a grain of salt along with the timeline. So the timeline is an estimate as well. Notice on the timeline that we have things starting back to back. Typically things don't start back to back. There's usually a couple days lag time, a couple days to, a week's worth of, people making decisions and then moving on to the next thing. So again, take all of it with a grain of salt, but it's going to give them an estimate, a ballpark for about how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. Any questions on this? Nope. All right, good. All right, so from that conceptualization competition, we decided to run a wireframes. So you'll notice that this conceptualization document is going to follow us through all the different phases down here, through all these different competitions. The conceptualization document will follow because this is basically the overall concept, the idea at the very end that we want to make happen. So that's why this conceptualization document will be included in all of the inputs. So for the wireframes, this is just going to define, again, the flow of the application. It's not going to be pretty. It's just going to tell you where the data sets are going to sit in space. In this case, we are trying to make a profile. So the profile page of the Copilots is what you are currently looking at. This was the first go-round of it. So we were trying to come up with what that might look like, and this is what the wireframes did for us. So from the wireframes, we moved into storyboarding. And the storyboarding is just going to give it the look and feel of how the end item is going to be presented. So at this point, it's just flat images. There's nothing clickable at this point, but it will give you a good idea of what the end result will look like. Next, we move into the UI prototyping. So this is where it becomes a living, breathing item. This is going to take the look and feel and give it some oomph. You're going to be able to click on different menus. If there's error messages that need to pop, you'll be able to see those. Anything that needs to be clicked on, you'll be able to click on it in this prototyping phase. So then we move on to specification to flush out all the details, activity diagrams, use case diagrams, all the different details that we need in order to create the back end. So from specification, we move into architecture. This is where we're just designing all the requirements based upon all those items that we had, the conceptualization document, the specifications where we kind of outlined all of the details. We move into the architecture. Next on to component design and development. So this is just going to design any modules that need to be created. This is kind of your traditional software development work. Then we move into assembly. So just kind of a note here. So all this looks very kind of linear down here, where it's very left to right. It doesn't actually happen like this. A lot of times what will happen is the Copilot will run an assembly competition once he gets one piece of the puzzle done. So it's not so much a left to right thing, but a lot of things do get run in parallel, which is why it allows you to get so much more completed so quickly. Now we also offer a full QA, so test scenarios, test suites, test cases. We can even write the test cases for you. And bug races. So bug races is a very loose term that we use on TopCoder. It's used to define not only a bug race to fix bugs, but also to make incremental changes in anything that's already been almost completed. So if you needed to change the font of something, we could run a quick bug race to fix that. If you wanted a different placement of different images, we could run a quick bug race to fix that. You know, and different items like that. So just small incremental changes. The bug races are very inexpensive, so that's why clients a lot of times will choose the bug races over launching a full competition. Typically a bug race is going to be about $150, somewhere around there, so it's very cost effective to make those incremental changes using the bug race. All right, so any questions on that methodology? Again, this was just one way, probably out of 500 different ways that we could have run this particular project, but this was the way that we chose. No? Okay, good. Okay, good. So what I want to do now is I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how all of these different competitions are graded, how a winner is selected, and also how payment is distributed. So first, I'm going to cover the payment of the competitions because I think that is something that is really important. So I'm going to start on the development side and then move over to the studio side. So I have queued up here a typical development competition. So this is a release assembly competition. A few things about this particular competition. I know that this competition is completed because this green bar here is all the way to the end. So if this competition were in progress, this green bar would only be up to the actual progress point at this particular time. But I know this is completed because the green bar is all the way at the end and the contest status is listed as completed. So now before the competition even begins, the co-pilot is the one who actually drafts the spec. So let's take a quick look at the spec. Oops. Let me click into this details tab here so we can take a look at the different areas. So the good thing about the co-pilot drafting the spec is that you don't have to worry about doing it, but you get an opportunity to see it before it even goes into this first phase of the timeline. So the spec is located down here in the specification area. So right now, this spec is actually on a wiki page. Now we are moving away from having the co-pilots create these wiki pages, and we're moving towards having the co-pilots put the actual spec here in this area in Cockpit, so clients don't have a million tabs open like I do. But this is what a typical spec looks like, right? Pretty straightforward. We list all the things that we want this to do, want to accomplish in this particular competition. We have our technology, our browser requirements. If there's any virtual machine that needs to be used, that information will be listed out as well. We also have the payment listed. So this is what the community sees, and this is public information. All right, so that's what the spec looks like. All right, so specifically looking at the prizes that surround this specific competition, let's take a look at kind of the items down here. So this contest total is an estimate of the total cost of this competition. Now, most likely you're going to come in lower than this, so this is just an estimate. Now, the final cost is provided to you at the very end of the competition on a receipt, which is listed over here. So again, since this competition has completed, I can see the receipt, and I will show it to you at the very end as well. But this is the contest total, the estimated total of this competition. Now, the first and the second place prizes are listed here. So the second place prize is typically half of the first place prize. This is pretty standard in a development competition. The contest fee is listed here. So this is based on each company's contracted price. So this is going to vary depending upon the company's contracted rate. Typically, it is a percentage of the total contest fee. I think it's like moving towards 100%, but I don't deal with contracts, so I don't know. But this will not be zero. There will be some number here, but as it stands right now, it's typically a percentage of the total contest cost. We also have a review cost. So you're going to get 3 reviewers, and they're each going to split this review cost. But the review timeline is extremely rigid, and they have 48 hours exactly to complete their review. Now, if they do not complete their review within that 48-hour time frame, for every hour that they're late, they actually get deducted. So this is why your total contest cost is generally less than this estimated total here. Our reviewers are not as prompt always as we would like them to be. So this is generally lowered a little bit. So we also offer a reliability bonus. So remember that we talked about that reliability rating on the members' profiles. So this is actually where the competitors get rewarded for being reliable. So anyone who registers for this competition and follows through with a submission, they're going to split this bonus. So we also have a spec review fee. So the co-pilot, remember, is the one to draft the spec. And even before the competition launches, the competition is going to be reviewed by a completely separate third-party person. So I can take a look at that review by clicking on the spec review tab here. So again, everything's very transparent. The client can see every single thing that I'm looking at here as well. So the spec review is pretty lengthy, and basically the reviewer is telling us whether this competition will succeed or whether it's going to fail. So remember I said when we were talking about that failure rate that we have a few different levels of protection to kind of make sure that our failure rate stays pretty low. This is one of those ways that we really try to mitigate that failure rate is by having a separate third party come through, read the spec, and make sure that everything is clear and that they think that this competition will succeed as well. So because the spec review is pretty lengthy, they do get a small stipend for doing the spec review. So that fee, again, is listed here. There's also the co-pilot fee. So this is a standard fee. Typically it's $600 per successful completion. We also have a digital run. So roughly 10% of the total contest costs will be put into our digital run pool. But that can really vary kind of based on the scope of the total contest. But we offer points and also money for our digital runs. So you really want to think of the digital run as an incentivization program for the competitors. So since clearly we're not a typical development shop, our experience tells us that to keep the competitors happy and to keep the best talent competing, we need to incentivize them. And this digital run is exactly how we do it. So for every category, every month, we have software design, software development, and studio. We'll take all the competitions that run under that area and use the money as payouts on top of what the competitors are earning winning the competitions. So let me go back to September here so we can take a look at a fully completed month. So typically we take the first 40 or 50, and so I think this one has 50. Yeah, so typically we take the first 40 or 50 and offer them additional money on top of whatever it is that they're earning. So in September, Lazy Child, not so lazy, got an additional almost 12 grand on top of his earnings for that month. That's a nice little bonus, isn't it?
So the client is paying for this?
Everyone pays into it.
Everyone pays into it?
Yep. Yep, even us. So this was an example of a TopCoder competition, right? So there's no contest fee here, but there is a digital run fee. So everyone pays into the digital run. But that's a good point. Everyone kind of gets caught up in each one of these little, I don't know, these little fees here. And maybe it's my fault because I go through each one in detail, but you really don't want to think of this as each little fee. You just want to think of this as the overall cost of doing a competition and really not get caught up in what each one of these costs really, breaks down to and how it figures out. Because most of these are actually calculated automatically for you. And again, you should just kind of think of them as the overall cost of the competition. Now, the first and the second place prize amounts are really determined by a few factors. So most importantly is kind of what the market is currently paying for this specific type of competition. So remember we saw on that graph that each type of competition had a different kind of market level. So that's going to be the most kind of the biggest factor, but also the scope of the competition, the amount of work that needs to be done, the complexity, and whether it's a technology that is new or something that a lot of people don't know about. Those are all factors that, again, go into the prize amount that's going to be awarded. And your co-pilot is going to know how to price these competitions competitively. So you should really lean on him or her for kind of insight into this.
Does the client see all of these, or do they only see the contest total?
Nope, they see every single one of these.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
How many reviewers are there for that $930?
So typically there's 3. And we're going to go through the whole review process when I go through the timeline. So give me like 5 minutes and we'll get through the process and we'll talk exactly about this fee and how many reviewers you get.
Okay.
Any other questions on these specific fees on these prizes? Nope. Okay, cool. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit now about the studio side. Okay, so I've popped open yet another tab, and I've queued up a typical studio competition, right? So in this case, it was an infographic that we ran. So what I'm going to do on the studio side, because it's kind of a little confusing to go down here, is I'm actually going to open the contest page. So I'm just going to click on this View Contest link over here, and this is going to open another tab. It's funny now. So kind of the biggest difference that you can kind of see right up front is that there can be more than just a first and second place winner, potentially third, fourth, fifth, and anyone else that you want to make payments to. So there's a little sign here that says more payments. So if you wanted to award more than just 5 places, you absolutely have the ability to do so. We also have the addition of checkpoint prizes. So the checkpoints are really an opportunity for the competitors to submit what they have done kind of halfway through, and it allows the client to give feedback back to the competitors so that they know kind of where they stand about halfway through, so they can either decide to make some changes to the design element, or maybe they're on the right track and the client just wants to see what their final product's going to look like. It's very, very important, especially on the studio side, to provide good feedback. So the studio side requires a bit more time than does the development side, because you're not really going to give any feedback on a release assembly competition. But a design competition needs a lot of feedback so that the competitors can know what direction to go, right? And this is an example of the type of feedback that we're looking for. So you'll see I just clicked on this checkpoints tab here. And these are the people who were awarded those 5 checkpoint prizes at $100 each. And this was the feedback that we gave. So we have overall feedback, which is listed here. And then we have some additional feedback for those guys who we issued the checkpoint prizes to. So the checkpoint people are typically the people who you're looking at most seriously to win this competition. So you want to give them a little more feedback than what you give kind of just for everyone who submitted something to you. Maybe you want to give specific information so that they can give you exactly what you're looking for. Above all, especially on the studio side, these guys just want you to pick their design. So they want to know what you think. And so all of this feedback is vital, and it's necessary, and it's important, especially on the studio side. So do be aware going into studio competitions that there is a lot of time commitment on the part of the client. Okay, so we also have Studio Cup points on the studio side. So the Studio Cup points pretty much work the exact same way as the digital run, only in Studio it's called Studio Cup. So we also offer money and points towards the Studio Cup. So again, this is an example of the type of work that we get out of this particular infographic competition. So you can see it runs the gamut. Everything from A to Z is here. The clients are always very, very impressed with the quality of work and the time at which they got them back. I mean, this contest lasted 2 weeks. And this is what we got out of it. So it's good stuff. All right, so any questions on the payouts that surround the studio side? Nope.
Yeah, sorry,
good.
Michelle, this
Sure.
is Dan. I just have a quick question. When it comes to the awarding, like the checkpoint prizes, does everyone see or have the ability to see the designs that those comments are coming back to on? So the greater audience can benefit from those feedbacks as well, or is that just private to the person who submitted?
They are public. But they don't, see this handle down here? This is not displayed until after the competition is over. So you see this ID here? This ID is the only thing that's displayed.
So they see the design and the comment, but they don't know who the specific
Correct.
person is.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, good. All right, so let's run through the timelines now. And this is a warning. This can be a little bit tedious, so I want everyone to take a nice deep breath and kind of bear with me here. We will get through these timelines hopefully as efficiently as possible. All right, so let's talk about first the development side. Let's talk about the development timeline. The great thing about the timeline is that they're all pretty much the same. So all of our competitions are actually pretty predictable. They all follow this standard timeline. So once you've seen one, you've seen them all, which is great. So let's go ahead and kind of talk about the different areas. So the Copilot drafts the spec, yes. The spec gets submitted. And then the spec goes into a spec review. So remember we took a look at that spec review that was that complete third party who took a look at it and kind of decided whether this competition would succeed or whether it would not succeed. So the spec review takes about a day or two. And then as soon as they approve it, then it's available for people to register for. So competitors typically have 2 days to register for a competition. So the registration phase is basically the first 48 hours of the entire submission period. Now, again, competitions can be restricted because of confidentiality or security, and we talked a little bit about that earlier. But again, doing so, you're going to limit the number of registrants and submissions that you have. So that's very on a client-by-client basis whether they want to do that or not. But during this registration phase, our system is going to monitor what's going on. So the system is going to tell the client in this little registration box down here the probability of getting good submissions and how many are probably going to pass review. So here you'll see that we predicted we would get 3 submissions, and we got 1, which is great. 1 to 3 submissions is really the ideal number. And this little indicator here will kind of move from red to yellow to green as the registration period moves forward. So sometimes if the registration is unhealthy, the Copilot can actually make some adjustments by adding more money or maybe extending the time frame of the registration period so that people have more time to do so. But your Copilot will keep an eye on this. But this prediction was based upon the number of registrants that we had and the reliability of those registrants that had signed up. So that's where we got this prediction. Again, the submission is 1, it's perfect. 1 is perfect. 2 is great. 3 is a lot of work for our reviewers. So 1 submission is really ideal. So then after that registration closes, it progresses through the submission period, and then it goes through screening and also review. So the screening and review process is completely automatic, and it's handled in its entirety by the community. So the client doesn't have to go through and review anything at this point. So typically there's going to be 3 reviewers, and these reviewers are listed down here, and they sign up during the initial registration phase. So to be on this review board, to be available to be a reviewer, they have to be qualified based on their current and their past submissions. Now remember, they also get paid for being a reviewer as well. So these guys are really, really good at this type of competition. That's why they get to be on this review board. You can kind of think of them as 1 step below a co-pilot. So these guys, we vetted them out. We know that these are good guys to review this type of competition. So the reviewer's job is really to ensure the quality of all the submissions that come in. So they're going to screen it, then they're going to review it. They're responsible for downloading and opening all of the submissions. They run all the test cases, and they also check it against a scorecard and issue it a numerical score. So let's take a look at these different scorecards. So you can see here's our 3 reviewers, and they all issue a separate numerical score down here. So each one has a different score. Each one is reviewed independently. They also do this blindly, so they don't see the person who submitted this. They only see this randomized set of numbers. And this ID number is not for Great Kevin. It is completely randomized for each and every submission that comes in. So they do the scoring blindly. They're really paid to nitpick everything. All right, so let's take a look at the scorecard, and I can kind of show you some things. Yet another tab here. You'll see that our scorecards are based on a rating system, so 1 through 4. And the scores are also weighted, so you'll see that listed here. So if a reviewer finds something that needs to be fixed, they're going to label it as a required fix. So you'll see that listed here. So the competitor must go in and fix all of these required items before it passes the final review. So you can see that if there is potentially, some things wrong with this, for example, this one, here's another required fix. Here's another one. So all of these scores are totaled and brought to the bottom. And you'll see that 88.75 listed here. That's where the score comes from. So there is an appeals process that the competitor basically has an opportunity to maybe present evidence if they think they were scored down in error. They can present the evidence to the reviewer, and then the reviewer can either decide whether to score them up or leave the score as is. But the reviewer is the one to issue the revised score, so the score is only changed if the competitor convinces them that they were scored down in error. So if they were scored down in error and the reviewer decides to change their score, that's what this appeals resolution phase is. If there's no appeals, then it just kind of skips right through this and goes to aggregating the scores, which basically means we're going to put all 3 scorecards together, and we're going to line them up so that the competitor can see everything that needs to be done. Then it moves into a final fix phase. So this is where the winner must go in and correct all the items that were labeled as required fixes from all of the scorecards. So the time frame for this final fix is about a day, and then it goes into a final review phase. This is where the reviewers must take a look at the submissions again and make sure that the competitor pretty much successfully completed all the fixes that were required. So if they do not complete all those fixes, it gets kicked back into this final fix phase. And sometimes it moves between final review and final fix a few times, which is fine. It's pretty normal. But once the reviewers give it the thumbs up and they see that everything was fixed as they said it should be, then the competition closes and it goes into an approval phase. So this is actually customer approval. So sometimes the client will do this, but more often than not, especially on, for example, a release assembly competition, the approval is typically done by the co-pilot to move forward onto another competition. So we basically use this exact same process for anything that can be looked at objectively and held up against a scorecard. Any questions, comments on the timeline or the review process?
So the co-pilot's basically not involved through the duration of the contest or the review. They set it all up to run and they do a final approval at the end, but in between it's pretty autonomous.
Yeah, now sometimes the co-pilot will be a reviewer, but that just kind of depends on if they want to be involved. But yeah, a lot of the times the co-pilot lets the lets the reviewers take care and do their thing. Because like I said, it's all automated. So it's all automatic. The client doesn't need to know any of it even goes on, although they can see everything that goes on. Whether they want to go in there and look at it, that's a whole other story.
I assume the system is sending all the right notifications to all the right people at the right times about what they have to do and whether they're overdue and that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah, we do. We have a whole kind of area in Cockpit, which we'll kind of get into in a little bit, where you manage different notifications. And so we send a notification each and every time one of these phases hits the start date and the end date, which can become a lot of email. So for the first couple competitions, typically clients will keep those on, but after the first couple competitions, getting emailed every single time that this happens is pretty irritating, especially since the client doesn't really do anything for these specific areas. But the competitors do know, and they do get notified as well when they do need to do something for whatever it is that they're signed up to do. Any other questions? Okay, cool. All right, good. So let's move on and talk about the studio side. So the studio side, it's kind of a little bit easier. There is no review board on the studio side, so there's no community selection. There's no kind of review process. Typically, there's a group at the client who decides which submission they like, right? So there's checkpoints that can be worked into the competition where the competitors take a break, they submit what they have, and then the competition moves forward from there. Now, again, in these studio competitions, typically you're looking at more submissions. So anywhere between 10 and 15 submissions is pretty typical. But sometimes if it's for a logo or maybe some buttons or something like that, there can be up to 40 or 50 submissions. So it just depends on what it is that you're looking for, kind of how many submissions you'll get. Okay, so in the timeline, very similar to the development side, the first step here is to submit the spec and put it through review. So we just want to make sure, again, that the specs are clear. So then it opens for registration, and the registration period is typically the first 48 hours of the entire submission period. And then it moves through our checkpoints and through submission and screening. So the screening here, they're not screening for which ones they think that the client will like most. They're screening for copyright infringements and other things along those lines. The screening process on the studio side is actually pretty involved and it's pretty lengthy. And we just want to make sure that what is being submitted is actually the work of the person who's submitting it and not something other than that. So we do take a lot of caution and a lot of care to try to prevent anything like that from happening. So then the review process happens, and of course this is client review, where the clients get to pick which submissions they like best. So usually when it comes to the studio side, the problem becomes, oh my gosh, I can't pick one I like most because there's so many to choose from, rather than, oh my gosh, I can't pick one because I don't like any of them. It's, oh my gosh, I can't pick just one. that becomes a problem on the studio side. All right, so any questions on any of those timelines? No? Okay, good. Okay, so we are almost done. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get into Cockpit and really focus on the management side of Cockpit. So earlier today we talked about the side that's going to help you summarize everything at a very macro level. We looked at all those graphs, all those widgets, all those different areas. So that's really great for clients who have a lot of different projects going on and who have been with TopCoder for a while. But the side that is going to help them kind of on a day-to-day basis manage everything that's going on is going to be this side of Cockpit. So let me start off by just going through some navigation items here. So the first thing you're going to see is the name of this particular project. So that's listed up here. We also have our project description, we have our budget and our duration. So the project budget and the project duration, these are actually set by the client, and they don't have to set these at all. This is just it's just for their reference. This doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's just kind of, if they want to put it in there, they can. They have the opportunity to. Down here we have our client managers. So these are the people on the client side who are going to be directly interacting with the platform. So this is generally the delivery team on the client side. So we also have TopCoder platform specialists and TopCoder account managers. So these are just TopCoder resources. These are people who will be helping this particular client on this project. So if I scroll down a little bit more, you're going to see this active contest health area, and I can really get an overview for what is going on just within this project. So all of these different line items are different contests that are happening right now in this project. So I can jump to this project page very quickly, or I can kind of take a look at what's going on with this project by using these colored dots over here. Now, don't get too concerned with these colored dots. These are mostly for your co-pilot's reference, but it does allow you to get to these areas pretty quickly. So, for example, if I wanted to take a look at the forums, I could quickly pop in here and take a look at the forums. If I wanted to take a look at the registration numbers, I could take a look at those registration numbers. So these are little hover over things. You can kind of, move here and do these little items. But again, most of these dots are for your co-pilot to kind of take a look at and manage and keep track of. So if I scroll down a little bit more, we're going to see our co-pilots. So remember I said that typically you're going to have 2 co-pilots on your project, a development co-pilot and a studio co-pilot. So this is where you can go to take a look at the different co-pilots who are on your project, and also where clients can go to leave feedback. Very important that we leave feedback for co-pilots as well. Also project stats. So before we looked at everything at a very high level, right? So this is a really good view because this is going to give you information just for this project. So it's a very narrowed view of what we were looking at before. And a lot of times clients will just take a screenshot of this entire graph here, slap it in an email, and send it out in a status report on Monday or Friday so everyone kind of knows where they stand. So this is a really good kind of area to kind of see where everything is. All right, so next, let's talk about the forums. So there's a couple different, what I call levels of forums. We have, first and foremost, our co-pilot forums, which will only be used during that initial co-pilot competition. So remember, the very first competition that you typically ever run on TopCoder is going to be a competition to get and find your co-pilot. In that competition, you're going to be chatting with the co-pilots using the co-pilot forum. That's where that forum comes into play. After you have your co-pilot, there's 2 other types of forums. We have our project forum, which is here, in these areas down here, and we also have the contest forums. So the contest forums are specific to each contest, and typically your co-pilot is going to be the one who pops into the contest forums and answers any questions that the competitors might have about that particular competition. So the contest forums are also where the competitors are going to chat back and forth with one another and field questions and ask questions, kind of as if they were all sitting in the same room with one another. You'd really be surprised at the camaraderie that happens between the competitors. Even though they're competing against one another, they're happy to answer questions for each other in these forums. So you'll see that happen if you pop into here and take a look at any of the threads. So the majority of the time, the co-pilots are going to handle and take a look at these forums in these contest forums. The forum that mostly clients are going to be concerned about are going to be these project forums. So the project forums is where you're going to be communicating back and forth between the co-pilots. So this is where your co-pilot may ask questions. They're going to, talk about strategy, requirements, or things like that with you and the different co-pilots. Now, as a best practice, we try to push everyone to use the forums when communicating with anyone on TopCoder. Now, there are a lot of different reasons that we push people to do this, but the main one is transparency. We like things to be transparent, and if everything's in a forum that is never deleted, it's always going to be there. So you never have to repeat yourself. You never have to have a question as to what was said and what wasn't said. It's never deleted. It's always going to be there. You can always go back to the project forums and or the competition forums. Any questions on forums? Nope. Okay, good. Now, I do want to point out, because it can be a little bit confusing, what we are currently looking at right here is the project page. So this is the project overview. And within this project, there are a lot of different competitions. And the competition page are these pages that we were at before where we were looking at the different timelines. So this is a competition page, and this is the project page. So I know that can be a little bit confusing, so I just kind of like to point that out. Okay, so let's talk about these tabs up at the top. The first one I'm going to talk about is the game plan. So let me pop over there. So the game plan is going to be a Gantt chart, and this is actually filled out by the co-pilots. So you don't have to be responsible for entering the information in here. This is going to be filled out on behalf of the client by the co-pilots. So this is a really great tool because you can see that a lot of the work is listed here. You can also see that a lot of it gets done in parallel. If I can find the bottom, there it is. All right, so I'm going to close this left-hand panel so we can see more of the actual Gantt chart itself. All right, so this is a really big project, but you can see that a lot of stuff gets done in parallel. So that's why this is a really good kind of way to show all the different items that we have. And you can see that there's a lot of different colors on here, and each color kind of means something different. So the red color is going to be a failed competition. The green color is going to be a completed competition. The blue are active competitions, and the gray colors are drafts. So these drafts are intended to be run at some point but have not yet kicked off. You'll also see the dependencies with these little arrows. So you can see that when we have a failed competition, it's going to be kind of pushed into another competition, going to be pushed into another competition, and the dependencies are listed in the arrows as well. So we also have these long lines that are kind of throughout the whole Gantt chart here, and those are indicative of milestones. So we're going to talk a little bit about what milestones are in just a second, but these are areas where you can kind of follow the progress of the project as a whole instead of kind of competition by competition by competition. So we'll get into that in just a second. Okay, so let's talk about these numbers at the top here. So this finished number here, this is what a client has paid out. This active number, this is what is currently running and what the estimated cost will be. So typically we estimate about 10% above what the actual cost is going to be, so that is figured in here. We also have our drafts, which are listed over here. So this is what is in the pipeline but has not yet started. So a little bit about these drafts and what's a really good way to kind of pose this to your client. It's a really good way to project out your budget. So for example, I have here about almost 37 grand that is lined up to be spent. So because I know this information, it allows me to plan ahead. So if I know my budget is going to be tight in the coming months, I can communicate that with my co-pilot and see if maybe we can push these out or maybe just run one at a time. Now, on the other hand, if maybe I have this money available to me now, I can see if the co-pilot can run more things in parallel to get this project completed faster. So the client is only paying for successful outcomes, not drafts or failed competitions, so only this finished area. Any questions on that? Nope. Okay, good. So let's talk about project milestones. So project milestones can really be anything. They give a high-level overview of what needs to be done in your project. So they allow a client to really follow the progress of the entire project instead of getting really, really lost in every single competition that's running. So probably in the beginning of an engagement with the client is going to be more active in each and every competition just because they're learning. They don't know what to expect. They don't know what comes next. So it's really helpful to kind of be in there and doing this very hands-on with everything, and we expect that and we anticipate that. But once they kind of get the feel for what's happening and they know that, oh, you know what, this is going to run and I don't really need to do anything, it's a development competition, they're going to kind of take a step back, and this allows them, these project milestones, they allow them to follow the project instead of competition by competition, just at a kind of project level. So they don't have to be involved in everything. They can set kind of points along the way that they want to check in and make sure things are going well, and then they can kind of check out until the next milestone, comes up and is due to be looked at. But you can see that here are some examples of the different milestones that are upcoming for this specific project. So you can see a lot of it is testing. And that's a very common place that you would insert a project milestones. So checkpoints within a project, beta releases, maybe some internal sign-off or approval that needs to be given. We have UI design cycles, QA cycles, so testing, or things along those lines. Those are all going to be good places and common points for people to put these different types of milestones. Any questions on those? Nope? Okay, good. All right, so the one other thing that I want to cover today, and then I'm done, I promise, is our project planner. And so to get to the project planner, I'm just clicking on this game plan item and then selecting game plan. So the project planner is a really good tool because it allows you or clients or anyone to go in here and kind of quote-unquote play with what the contests are going to cost and what the timeline is going to look like. So, we can run different contests here. Let's just do A, B, and C. And maybe I want my first contest to be a conceptualization. Then I want to do design. Then I want to do assembly. So this allows me to see where all these numbers are and how much this is generally going to cost me. So this contest fee won't be zero if you're looking at a client. If you're looking at a client screen, it's not going to be zero. But you can also set these as dependencies. And that allows us to kind of make sure that everything flows correctly. I can also plan so many bug races. Maybe I want 3 bug races. It's going to cost me $450. And I can preview what this is going to look like. So this allows me to see basically that Gantt chart that I just had earlier. And it's going to estimate the duration, the cost, and I can see the timeline listed here as well. About 45 days total. This can also be exported to an Excel spreadsheet. So that becomes very powerful then so that you can give this to some executives or whoever needs to see the timeline and or the cost. And the great thing about this is that this actually doesn't affect anything on the Gantt chart itself. This is just a play area, basically, so you can kind of see what it would look like should you decide to do these competitions at the start date. And that's all I got for you. Any questions on anything we covered? Are you awake? Okay, cool. All right, good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording at this point.